Welcome to our 10-minute guide on Red-Green Eldrazi featuring Obosh, the Prey Piercer. We're an aggro ramp deck. We seek to win the game by turn 4, and we do so by ramping turn 1, playing a aggressive 3-drop on turn 2, and then an aggressive 3-drop again, or maybe even a 5-drop on turn 3, and then we tend to win on turn 4. We have a very aggressive game plan that seeks to set us up to be almost unbeatable when we're able to execute upon it. So dirtily decks beware. So Obosh the Prey Piercer is a 3 colorless, 2 hybrid Rakdos mana for a 3/5, and when it's in play, any of our odd cost cards deal double damage, essentially. It's got a 3/5 body, so it can tussle and it's decently survivable, and as we're all finding out, having a free extra 8th card living in our companion zone where it cannot be touched and can be played as soon as we are ready for it is pretty tremendous. I wanted to look at Obosh because with the more popular Lurrus and Urian decks that are in play a lot, those decks have a tendency towards dirtling, towards value. And so we want an aggressive game plan to be able to go underneath those decks and to just kind of smash them in the mouth before they're really ready to start generating their tremendous value game plan. Red-Green Eldrazi has been an archetype that's been hanging around and seeing good, even though fringe success at various tournaments. It's not brought to a lot of tournaments. There aren't a lot of pros iterating upon it, but in the hands of the right pilot, it can definitely do some damage. Adding Obosh to this already decently successful shell is not that costly. So the companion restriction of Obosh is that we have to have only odd costed cards in our deck. So for the Red-Green Eldrazi, what that means is that we have to cut Bloodbraid Elf and we have to cut Thought-Knot Seer. So Bloodbraid Elf, frankly, with our ramp game plan, has a tendency to be fairly inconsistent anyway. And we don't care that much about card advantage when we are trying to win this game on turn 4. We want to push, 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 and win. So we don't care that we might draw and play an extra Birds of Paradise or something silly like that. Similarly with Thought-Knot Seer. Thought-Knot Seer is an extremely powerful card that can really disrupt an opponent's game plan, and people do not like seeing this card played against them, but the loss of that forces us to be more aggressive because, again, we don't care about this card advantage that TKN basically builds. So cutting these 2 cards just pushes us to be more aggressive, which is what we want to be doing anyway, so it can be considered kind of a wash. Additionally, there are no shortage of strong 3-drops to play from the Gruul archetype. So it's not like we're having to choose from bad cards to play here. We're just playing more of the same in greater quantities to be able to fill this gap. It's very important for us to have a turn 2 play in our opening hand. And by turn 2, I mean play a 3-drop on turn 2. So it's very important for us to have a ramp card, 2 lands, and a payoff card, a 3-drop in our hand. The odds of this happening are roughly 65%. So we've got 81% chance to have 2 lands, 86% chance to have 1 ramp card, and 94% chance to have a 3-drop payoff. So mulliganing down to 6, if we don't have this game plan, is a good idea. Almost always. I guess the exception is if it's in a post-sideboard game and we know exactly what we want to do against our opponent and we have the exact right hate card, then potentially we don't want to mulligan down. But if we don't have a T3 play, if we don't have a turn 2 play, we're basically starting the game on turn 3, which is a great way to lose the game in Modern. The mulligan to 5 decision is, of course, a little bit harder. I would still say if there's nothing until turn 3, we want to take that chance, roll the dice. We don't care about the extra card that much. But Lightning Bolt and Stomp can both be utilized as a turn 2 play in a pinch if we need a little bit of interaction. So the decision is a little bit tougher. Lightning Bolt, Stomp do help with that, but usually we want to make sure we can execute upon our game plan. all of our payoff cards, our 3-drop payoff cards, have the ability to pressure our opponent's face, but they do so in slightly different ways. Goblin Rabblemaster tends to snowball on itself. We get 1 immediate ping damage in that first, and then we get 4 damage the next, and then it just builds from there, particularly if we play a second Goblin Rabblemaster right afterwards. It just builds upon itself and generates this really difficult tide of goblins to deal with. Spellbreaker is a very solid bro. She comes down either as the 3/3 haste, which potentially in the mix with a hierarch can get 4 damage in right away and start chunking down the opponent's life total, or if we think that they have a lightning bolt, we may want her to come down with the +1/+1 counter to be able to dodge that and to set up some good solid blocks for if we're gonna slug it out with another aggressive deck. Eldrazi Obligator can come down and swing in for 3 damage right away, or again 4 if there's a hierarch in play. Sometimes we want to hold off on our Obligator. It is tremendously fun to grab one of their big creatures and swing in for the win. This card can just win the game out of nowhere, and the cost of pulling another creature onto our side for a turn is relatively minimal, happens on turn 5 or potentially turn 4, and can just kind of win the game out of nowhere. Clothis, as you've probably heard, is as a house. She comes down and she just generates this tremendous amount of value over time, tremendous amount of pressure over time, draining the opponents or ramping ourselves, and she's incredibly hard to deal with. A 4/5, an indestructible enchantment. There's Celestial Purge, I suppose, can exile it, or Borrower can drop her back into our hand, but for the most part, she just sits on the board, accruing pressure against our opponent, and then eventually she turns into a creature and can start swinging in and doing some damage herself with her fists or her giant spear. Be warned, of course, that when she does become a creature, she dies to Path, she dies to Dismember, so be cautious with your devotion if you suspect your opponent is ready to remove her. Bone Crusher Giant, an excellent 3-drop, versatile 3-drop. Typically, we want to try to get a little bit more value out of him with a stomp and then playing him as a creature. However, perfectly sufficient aggressive 3-drop to come down on turn 2. 4/3 definitely can do some damage. And then when it's mixed up with a Domri or with a Hierarch swinging in for 5 can really help close this game quickly as well. And then Domri himself, of course, better with another creature on board. The fight is very relevant. And then the +1/+0 Orcish Oriflamme style effect also works well, as well as the ramp. So Domri all fits together and synergizes with the rest of our deck, but not a good empty board play, to be frank. Reality Smashers are, of course, our solid spaghetti monster. Everybody fears Reality Smasher. 5/5 haste trample for 5 mana is incredible. Obosh does incredible work in this deck, as mentioned before. All of our cards basically are odd costed, so we're getting double damage from pretty much everything. We've got a couple trample creatures with Smasher, of course, and Spellbreaker. And trample damage doesn't work quite as well as you'd think it might in this, because trample damage is assigned all at the same time as the other damage. So the trample damage doesn't just get doubled, it gets assigned and then doubled, if that makes sense. So if we take the example of a Reality Smasher versus a 3/4 Goyf, the way to figure it out is you take 2 times the creature's power minus 2 times the blocker's toughness, and that is the trample damage. So versus a 3/4 Goyf, we take 2 times our Reality Smasher's power, which is 10, minus 2 times the blocker's toughness, which in this case is 8 because it's a 3/4 Goyf, and we end up with 2 trample damage assigned. Please note that Stomp, as a even costed card, does not get the double damage benefit of Obosh, but Lightning Bolt absolutely does. Lightning Bolt might be a low-key best Magic card ever, and 1 mana for 6 damage is tremendous. Quick note on sideboarding. Meta is pretty variable, so run what you think is most appropriate at the time. I prefer a lot of anti-blue tech with Choke and Veil. Choke also hilariously hits Amulet Titan. I like Moon versus Tron and E-Tron. Graveyard Hate is always super important, so never leave home without that. Siding out things can be difficult because everything fits well into our game plan. I tend to side out Lightning Bolts if there are no small targets, Obligator if there are no big targets. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this, and we'll catch you next time. Okay, bye-bye.